I just kind of like fell into the Homestuck chasm.
And you've been here ever since. And we're
Yes, I
all better
live
for it.
down here
So thank
in.
you.
I live in the darkness at the bottom of the pit now.
Well, I'm glad you joined me. I've been here for 9 years.
Welcome to our pit.
Right.
We've got wonderful amenities. There's some dirt over there. There's a rock over there.
Yay.
Don't mind the skeleton. If you hear them talking, ignore them.
Yeah. Okay, so
10. It's time.
It's 1:00 and we've got 71 people currently listening. So we're gonna introduce the panel and ourselves. So welcome. This is the second annual writers panel at SAHCon. We did the same thing last year. It is basically just a Q&A style panel about writing for fan games. Probably writing generally, possibly specific writing if you have questions about like specific projects that we've worked on. If you have questions, you can put them in the panelist questions 1 chat, which you should have permission to do that in. Let me just make sure. No, you couldn't.
That's why no one sent any questions.
Now you can ask questions. I'm a liar. I love lying. So now you can talk in the chat normally. I was wondering. I'm like, normally people have questions. So we'll go through. We will not have time to answer all the questions. But we will attempt to hit most of them, get the most interesting ones, etc. So now I'm going to we're going to introduce ourselves. So why don't my fellow panelists introduce themselves? I'm gonna start with Momo.
Oh, hi.
We'll start with Momo.
Hi. Yeah, I am Momo. I've been a reader of MS Paint Adventures as far back as Problem Sleuth while it was updating, so I've been here for a long time, seen some shit. And right now, I'm technically still working on Act 8. It's not canceled, it's just slow. And I'm helping Jonaya with Friendsim 2. And I've helped on maybe a lot of things that people have seen. Like I helped Austin a little bit with Vast Error, we're old friends. Stuff like that, yeah. That's me.
And sitting in the room physically with me, but not with a separate Discord, is Anna, if you want to introduce yourself.
Hello, people of SAHCon. I'm Anna, aka Archetypes Composed. You may know me from my YouTube channel, but you also may know me as the writer for Volume 2 of Friendsim 2, the writer for the Mindfang route of DistantQuest, and the writer of the Ancestor musical Time's Apprentice. Also, I am a trained musical theater writer. I write musicals. I wrote a musical about a goddess of female revenge who enacts revenge against men who harm women. Check out that on my channel. But yeah, if you have questions that have to do specifically with script writing or writing music on top of game writing, I'm the one to ask.
And my name is Jonaya Riley. I'm the director and lead writer for Friendsim 2. I've worked on a number of other projects, both in and out of the Homestuck fandom, and done a lot of writing on my own. So yeah, I also have a lot of experience with script writing and game dev. So the way we're going to do this is we're going to pick questions, and then each of us will give like our version of the answer. There's only 3 of us, so that shouldn't get too burdensome. And we already have a question in the chat, which is from Eggs of the Past. Do you find it hard writing for characters that have little screen time? So I don't know. Either of y'all wanna take this one from the top? Go for it.
I can go first.
Sure. Yeah, sure.
I mean, I'd love to hear Anna's answer, but the answer is no, because a character in a narrative, they're doing something. Like, everything is there for a reason. I think you just need to figure out what that reason is, not just in the source material, but in what you're doing. And a lot of that can be invention. So if you're pulling a character in from somewhere, you just have to, answer your whys and hows. What's your scene really about? What's this implying? What's it exploring? And just find the angle that the character has to get into that. So you can always expand off of what you do know in the canon if there's not that much time. You can find that little grain of, okay, what is this really about? And just kind of become the oyster and just secrete your mucus and form it into a nasty little pearl.
That is such a description.
You want to go now? I'm responding to I'm just letting people know not to chat in the questions
Good.
channel.
I was worried that was like oyster.
No, I was typing.
So, the answer is definitely no for me, because I wrote a 2-hour musical about the ancestors. But, honestly, it really just comes to, does this character give me inspiration? Because there's plenty of... So, I love Friendsim so much. There's plenty of Friendsim characters that give me zero inspiration. Like, I couldn't care less about Demon. I'm not writing the Demon route. For that reason, in particular, because I don't care about him. So, like, but there are characters that have very little screen time. Like, honestly, most of the Friendsim characters don't have that much screen time. I've written, the Friendsim characters I've mostly written stuff for are Artisius, Stelsa, and Tagora, because, Friendsim 2, route. But, like, honestly, like, Tagora appears twice. He doesn't actually have that much screen time in Friendsim, even if it's slightly more than some of the characters. Stelsa also appears twice. Like, these characters that are built with Friendsim 2 are really very bare bones, and we have done so much to flesh them out just with our own headcanons. And sometimes when you are, let's go back to the ancestors. The ancestors don't talk, except for Mindfang. The description of the handmaid's situation was enough to spark an entire musical, because if you just think about it, a girl who was stolen as a child to be the servant to a, like, celestial being, like, that is such a concept. They don't need to have spoken at all for you to play with that concept.
So, actually, this is sort of directly relevant because, like, so the Friendsim 2 route that just dropped on Friday, that Momo's route, or should I say, like, 99% of it is Momo's route, and I wrote the little bit at the end where Zebedee is, because Zebedee is, like, doesn't show up for much, he's not in the game a whole lot, but, like Momo was saying, like, they're characters in the story that, like, they serve a purpose in the story. Like, if a character genuinely has, like, no point whatsoever and is just there annoying and, like, the character it shouldn't be in the story. Like, everything you're putting in there is put in there on purpose. And, like, even a character with very little screen time, like, you want to try to figure out, like, okay, what are they doing in the story? Who are they as a character? How do I convey that in a way that fits this narrative and serves to advance this? So, like, maybe you don't see a lot about their internal life, but, like, you know, you kind of focus, at least I focus in on what their role is in the story and then just drive from there. So, like, hard, I don't know if it's necessarily harder than writing other characters. It's just, like, the approach to it may be a little different, because you're not talking about a character that you get to sit with for a long time and, like, follow their internal world as much. So you gotta kind of, like, shorthand some of that stuff. Okay, so we're getting a lot of questions now. Let's see here. I'm flagging these, the ones that I think were gonna be interesting. Actually, so we've got two that I think are probably connected. We could probably answer them as one. So we have one person asked, do you have some advice for writing characters in a Homestuckish way? And a similar question, how can you write in a character's voice accurately and consistently? Homestuck did that extremely well, and I am Jelly. So I think we could probably kind of combine those. I don't know, Anna, if you want to go first on this one.
So it's a kind of funny story. So I come from a family of writers. My mom is a writer. She's a writing teacher and has an MFA in creative writing. And I just got my MFA in musical theater writing, and I was talking to her about my playwriting class and about how I kind of struggle writing action because every scene I write is just two people vibing. Everything I write is just two people vibing. And she looked at me and was like, that's because you're a Homestuck. So, like, honestly, the Homestuck style is people vibing. Get two characters, feel out who those characters are and just sort of, what would they do if they were in a room just talking neurodivergently, just sort of bouncing off each other. But, and writing in a character's voice accurately and consistently. So, I feel like being a voice actor helps me with that, because I have very solid voices for people. So, if I'm writing a piece of Tizia's dialogue, I will read it in her voice afterwards to make sure it actually makes sense. Can't do that with stealth because my voice doesn't go that high. But, another good tip that I always do for, like, voice of a character, do they say fuck? And if they say fuck, when do they say fuck? The Dolorosa never says fuck. There is no circumstance where Rosa will say fuck.
Let Dolorosa say fuck.
She gets one.
The
It's like a PG-13 movie.
rarely says fuck, but if he says fuck, you know that there's business happening.
Yeah.
If the Signless says fuck, you fucked up. The Handmaid says fuck every other sentence.
Yeah, so, like, I want to save Momo for last, because I think Momo's gonna have a lot to say about this, having written Act 8.
Oh, absolutely.
So, like,
I'm
I think that, like, anytime you're writing as a character, like, it's helpful to, like, read existing writing, assuming, like, because we're mostly talking about fan writing, so you're working off of something that already exists, to kind of read that character's existing writing, get a feel for who they are as a character and as a person, and then, like, extend that. So, like, things like patterns of speech, phrases they use, how short or how long they tend to go on when they're talking, how much they curse, if they swear a lot or if they don't, what kind of swear words they use, like, things like that. And, like, we see a lot of that with, like, Homestuck has things like the typing quirks that kind of give a character, like, this unique identity in terms of how they talk, and, like, to think about that in terms of what they're going to say and what kind of things are important to them too. And then I agree that, like, especially if you're writing for a game that has voicing, like, saying the words out loud and, like, kind of thinking about it in terms of audio is good too, because, like, you're gonna sometimes you realize that, like, oh, this thing I've written goes on for a little too long, or it feels too short for this character. And yeah, like, a lot of it just comes down to, at least for me, reading what's already been written, figuring out who you see that character as, and then just, like, putting yourself in that headspace when you're writing. So, like, in terms of the Homestuck style, that's using the Homestuck characters, and if it's an original character, same thing. Like, you've got this idea in your head and you want to stick to it. So, I'll let Momo take it away.
Yeah. Well, kind of all the things that Anna and Jonaya just said about character. Character voice is about kind of all those things put together. It's a type of acting. So you have to act the character. You need to know their vocabulary. You need to know their motivation. You need to know their habits. And their tone. How do they convey their emotions? What are they trying to hide? What are they trying to share? Things like that could really help you narrow in on how this character is going to speak, how they conduct themselves. And Vriska is so easy to write. Like, I love every time I get to write Vriska for Act 8, because I'm like, I know you, I know what's going on in there. And she just is so easy. Where Jade I really, like, struggle with, because she's just good, like, she's a better person than me, so it was like, what problems do you have? I can't tell.
I care about you.
So, but I love Jade, one of my favorite characters.
She's wonderful. Actually,
She's wonderful.
that dovetails really well into a question we got here. So, we have a question that says, do you have any tips for writing to create emotion or latch readers into liking characters and caring about what happens to them? So, I guess it's my turn to answer first. After I clear the COVID out of my lungs. So, like, that's a really hard question to answer, because, like, what makes an individual reader or player or whatever latch onto a character and like them varies so wildly. I mean, like, generally speaking, having characters that feel relatable, having characters that, like, struggle with things that maybe aren't analogs one-to-one for what we go through, but, like, similar problems. Like, dealing with issues of like class and oppression. Um, do you have to be careful with that? If you veer too much into like appropriating real life, struggles of an oppressed group and not thinking too much about where that comes from, you can end up in some sticky territory where it feels like you're kind of using like trauma theater a little bit. I think would probably be the right phrase for that. But generally speaking, to try to pick something about the character that you think the readers will be able to relate to, in terms of like personal struggle or in terms of like what they're dealing with in their environment as a whole, and you're kind of like scaling that up or down depending on what your situation is. So like reaching that emotional core of like, this is an emotion that I understand. Like, oh, this character is worried about something they care about. Like, I understand that. I get worried about things that I care about too. I worry about people around me. So like even when the character's in a situation that's very like outsized, the emotional core is still something very tangible and very concrete. And like focuses in a way that the reader can look at that and like empathize with them. So you're basically building empathy by making a character that has emotions that feel relatable, and then you express those emotions when you're talking. So the character's you're gonna let their internal world out a little bit. And I'm gonna let one of the other writers maybe tell more about how to do that, because I don't want to ramble too much. Either one of you can pick up.
Oh, you're making us like Anna and I just always like fight for
Yeah,
who's gonna
dude.
Momo, you go.
It's obviously
Pull out a
so
knife.
competitive. We're just so competitive and violent as people. It's maybe an unintuitive answer, but there's actually there's like a it's like a machine. There's a mechanical rule to kind of how you make people invested in stories, and a lot of it is stakes. Stakes have to feel real.
Yeah.
So it's a lot of it will come from the scenarios that are happening. And the puzzle of like, why can't this problem just be solved? What's in the way? And is it something internal going on with the characters, something in the world? And the other part of it is charisma. Like, what makes the people in your story charismatic? And there's two things that get people every time. They're suckers for it. It'll get them every time. Are these people smart? Are these people funny? And unfortunately for everyone on the planet Earth, the characters in Homestuck are very smart and very funny, with some blind spots, some exceptions. Well, we can get into that. But yeah, that's basically it.
Honestly, you fucking nailed it on the head. I was about to say, like, at risk of sounding like my playwriting professors, you gotta have stakes. Where are the stakes? Where's the drama? Because every single week, it's like, oh, this doesn't have enough drama to it, and whatnot. But, yeah, no. You're not gonna be invested in a story where it feels like nothing is happening. And believe me, I've seen plenty of things where it felt like just nothing was happening. Like, you're not gonna care. So, like, Homestuck does, as a comic, rambles on a lot. And that is a, thing that many people have criticized it for. But there is always a threat to existence in Homestuck itself. Coming back to Friendsim 2, there are stakes. Alternia is a hell planet. If you don't either save or empower your friends, they will die. Like, and as the volumes have gone on, those stakes have ramped up from just, oh, they're gonna be sad and trapped, to, oh shit, people are literally dying here.
Yeah.
So yeah, if you're writing something, this is something that I take from my music writing. If you are writing something and it makes you choke up a little, you did it right.
Yeah, and like, just I really quick wanted to dovetail into something Anna was saying at the end there, talking about like the sort of like stakes ramping up. I think with a longer work, it's also important to sort of like pace the emotional stakes so that you give the reader, player, whatever, the person consuming the media, some room to breathe at some point. So like, if it just becomes relentless and, ramps up and ramps up and ramps up, if the work is long enough, the player's going to start to like lose focus on that, and it just becomes overwhelming. And conversely, if you have it just always being chill and not much is happening, then like unless the player just really likes the characters and really likes the setting, it's going to become boring. So like you kind of want to like ebb and flow how your story works. So sort of like a roller coaster where you're going up the hill and then you go down the hill and up the hill, and you want to keep the story's forward momentum emotionally going. And you I mean, a lot of it just comes down to vibes. You like, does this feel emotional to you? Does it feel like it resonates? Does it make you feel something? Because like,
Make yourself cry.
Yeah, if you
Make
write
yourself
something
cry.
emotional, someone else will probably find it emotional too. Let me see. Let's see what we've got. We have a lot of questions, so I'm trying to pick ones that are either related or like really interesting. Actually, this one is kind of a different kind of question. So someone asked, do multiple people work on writing and fleshing out one specific character or route at one time? I guess that's probably more like a Friendsim 2 specific one, but if so, how do you resolve creative disputes should they come up? I think like as a general question. And I think we're back to Momo answering first, so.
Yeah, Jonaya had to put up with me for like all of Friendsim 2. I made her life worse every single day because I was like, no, we can't have Marsty say that.
That's not true.
That's not true. You're lying to these people. So, yeah, no, because Marsty, a lot of the characters I'm dealing with appear in other volumes, other routes in Friendsim 2. So, but I only get to write one of them. Unfortunately for me, I don't get to write all billion words in the video game. I wouldn't want to do
Friendsim
that.
3 will be a million words long.
A million words long, and you'll like trap me in a hole and make me write it all as punishment. But yeah, so I kind of have to reach out and go, okay, no, we need to do this differently, we need to do that differently, and there's like all this compromise of what do we have to set up for the collaborators, the other things that are being foreshadowed. What can we do to strengthen the overall connective tissue in this thing, make it a cohesive whole? That does take cooperation, a whole lot of talking, a whole lot of time, and compromise. But it's awesome. Like it's so worth it. Watching this thing to come together has been cool as hell. So yeah, thank you for putting up with me.
Do you wanna go next?
Yeah, so there's a couple characters that I'm sharing with Jonaya. Basically anyone who's sharing a character is just sharing them with Jonaya.
Yeah.
And I mean, it depends on, honestly, for the characters we're splitting, it really depends on who got to them first.
Who claimed them?
Like, Tisius and Stelsa, they're my girls. When we started this project, I was like, when we were having a big conversation in a public server somewhere where Jonaya was like, oh, let's do a Friendsim 2, and I was like, I'm writing the Tisius stuff. She's mine. I'm doing this. You can't stop me.
Mm-hmm.
And so, honestly, like, Jonaya's characterizations of Tisius and Stelsa honestly come from my characterizations of them in the Progeny. That's another thing I've written. The Progeny on AO3, a adoption fanfiction. Don't you want to see them adopt a child? Who is
good. It's a good fic. It's also one of the reasons Friendsim 2 exists.
It is one of the reasons Friendsim 2 exists. But Jonaya based her characterizations off my writing. Now there's a route that we're co-writing. A route that we're co-writing. Later on, am I allowed to tell them who the characters are?
Yeah, it was in the trailer, so.
Yeah, we're co-writing the Chixie Zebra route. And, like, I like Chixie, but I haven't actually spent that much time writing her. Jonaya has spent more time writing Chixie, so I'm deferring to Jonaya's characterization when it comes to Chixie, and honestly, I've never written Zebra before, so I'm definitely deferring when it comes to Zebra.
Horrible
I hate him.
person. Well, so, like, just in general, with collaborative writing on a bigger project, like, there obviously needs to be some way to resolve, like, plot disputes, and, like, that kind of depends on the project. Like, in this project, I kind of, like, grabbed everyone and dragged them along, with what the plot is, although that's not really true. So a bunch of us have kind of hashed out, like, okay, this is what we want as the overall plot with feedback from the other writers. So, like, like Momo was talking before about working with their route, and then so the route that preceded it was kind of writing to the characterization of a couple of the characters in that route. So I ended up doing a bunch of revisions because, like, okay, this is not how Marcy would react to this situation. This is not how she would talk. And, you know, your choices are basically like, have the writer just say, no, I'm going to do this anyway, in which case the routes are going to feel disjointed and the character is going to feel weird. Or you can do revisions, which is like a huge part of writing in general. So like having your team able to communicate and bounce things off of each other. I will say that when it comes to like large writing projects, having like not like I mean, having a smaller number of writers is probably to your advantage, like under 10, because you're going to be able to more easily kind of coalesce this into a whole, unless you're like a professional operation that has like a lead writer that's being paid and all that good stuff. But like in a fan project, you kind of want to keep your writing team relatively small. Make sure that they all like communicating with each other, that they're all able to bounce ideas off of each other. And then, like Anna was saying, you kind of like, if you're writing for multiple characters and you've got something like a Friendsim style route, you're kind of like, okay, these are the main characters for this route. So this writer is going to kind of like, you know, they're going to set the tone as far as how they're written, and the other writers are going to write to that characterization. And then you've got like, you might have characters that show up randomly, like characters like Zebedee, where they don't have their own focal route. They're just kind of there. They're supporting characters. And those can be either you could have central characterization, or you could have someone else. Like I ended up writing Zebedee's dialogue. That makes it consistent, and he's actually kind of fun to write. I never thought I would say that, but but like, yeah, you want your creative team to be able to communicate. You want them to be able to talk to each other. Like at the end of the day, the people that are running the project are generally going to be the ones who kind of like make the final call in the case of like a real big dispute. But like that shouldn't be a hostile thing. It shouldn't be something where it's like your writers shouldn't feel resentment. If you make like a narrative, like if your narrative director or your lead writer makes a call, they shouldn't feel like bitter that was done. Like it should be done for a reason that serves the story and makes the game or the comic or whatever stronger. And like part of that is just like having people that get along with each other and are able to bounce ideas off of each other, because like, I mean, it sucks when you're trying to write with somebody that you don't like talking to. Like that's very difficult to do. I won't say impossible, but like it's better if you have a team that can kind of like, you know, vibe with each other, at least creatively. So yeah, let me look through the questions. Okay, this one is this one is very specific to Homestuck. I think this might be interesting. It says, while you are writing, do you often think about the everything is canon and not canon at the same time Hussey implemented in the good old days of Homestuck?
I guess it's my turn to
Yeah,
go
you can
first.
go first.
Honestly, this is fan content. It doesn't matter what's canon. Like, when it comes to Friendsim 2, I guess we are sort of creating the new canon, but like, honestly, we are creating the canon we want. It doesn't matter what Pumpkin says is canon, because we're not What Pumpkin, and this is a fan project. So, for example, can I mention?
Yes.
A ship that Jonaya loves and has really turned me on to is Chixie and Elward. They, like, barely talk in canon in Hiveswap. They don't talk at all in Friendsim 1. They're not What Pumpkin canon, but we like it, so they're canon. But, like, canon doesn't matter because we're doing fan projects.
Yeah. My answer is going to be short, so I'll go next. I have not been in Homestuck fandom as long as either of my two fellow writers, so like my views on Homestuck and its canon might differ slightly, and I also came in basically in the post-canon era, which is going to color how I see things as well. But generally speaking, like, canon is important to like understanding and analyzing a work. I don't think it's completely irrelevant. But when it comes to creating fan work, it kind of like its relevance varies. It depends on how much you want to unpack the stuff in the original work. It depends on how closely you're trying to associate your stuff with the original work. Like, I think with something like Friendsim 2, where we're positioning it as a sequel, it's I think it's in good faith to try to unpack the original to some degree and try to, like, at least adhere to canon in the sense of, like, you can see how it got from point A to point B, not necessarily that everything is literally the same. We use the device of a time skip to help facilitate that, but, like, I think it really depends on what you're doing and what you want to do. Like, if you're writing your own fan fiction and you just want to make the characters, like, you want to take the characterization and make them do something else, like, cool. I think it's important to be aware of what you're writing in general and just, like, the context in which you're writing it, but I don't think that precludes, like, you don't have to write them exactly as they were in canon or adhere strictly to canon or care at all about what the original author thought about something. It's just, like, it's nice for analysis, in my opinion, but, like, when it comes to creating your own content, it becomes less and less relevant the further you move away from the original work.
Yeah. I guess that's me then, isn't it?
Yes.
Well, I'm going to start my answer with a confession. I have something to admit to all of you gathered today. I like Homestuck. I like it a lot. I like it. I like it a lot, and I care very much about what Homestuck cares about. Not in the sense that, like, Homestuck and I care about the same things, but, like, that question of what it has its focus on is I'm obsessed with that.
Mm-hmm.
And Homestuck has been very interested in this, like, canon or not canon thing for a very long time. If you go back to, like, as early as Act 6, or just the angst of dealing with multiple timelines, that's kind of always been about this, and it kept maturing through Act 6, and then it came up in the original Friendsim, and then it kind of came up again in the epilogue. So very clearly, Homestuck is the place to be if you want to worry about this question. But, so I keep coming back to it, you know, I keep wondering, I keep interrogating that, because what does it actually mean? Like, if the epilogues were supposed to provoke people to make more fan content, more fan endings, they were already doing that. So is that... Yeah. I think Homestuck's maybe being a little dishonest, so I'm always kind of poking at this, exploring it, and, like, this is fascinating. Why is Homestuck so obsessed with this? Why am I so obsessed with it? And in Act 8, I sort of imply that maybe this isn't, like... Maybe this is kind of a little fucked up, nasty thing. Like, this is the sort of author's, like, making the fanon into his Sophia that he's gonna merge with to absolve him of, like, being the demiurge and nasty stuff like that makes you feel gross. Because Homestuck is also about stuff like that. So I'm just always thinking about it every day.
Yeah.
And I'm always finding new ways to sort of approach it in different fan works. Like, I'm gonna poke at it in Root and Meat Clown, which are some, like, smaller projects I'm working on right now, because I've done this big project for so long, I got burnt out.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know if that answered anything. I don't know. I don't know, and it scares me.
It's an answer. Yeah, like, I think it's a very personal, very subjective answer, and it has a lot to do with your relationship to Homestuck as a work. Like, for me,
oh man,
I have so much more ties to the fandom as fan creation post canon that, like, my view on it is a lot more like, no, these are, like, characters that I can just play with, and
it's a sandbox.
Yeah, and less like, you're obviously more, like, interested in what Homestuck itself has to say and, like, what that means, which is
also a sandbox.
Yeah.
I've been analyzing the concept of a sandbox fandom lately.
If Homestuck is like, I'm canon, but canon doesn't matter. Like, what are you doing? Like,
yeah.
Why are you here? Wait.
You are the author of your own self-destruction.
Of course it matters, because you keep stabbing me, right?
Right.
Like, I'm worried I'm stabbing you.
And, like,
I'm worried.
I do think that it matters in the sense of, like, it informs how people engage with the work and with the fandom too, and you get, like, it's a very complicated, interesting question.
Oh yeah, Homestuck and I have just this wonderful fucked up relationship. Like, what you do matters, because on some level you will always matter to me, and that's fucked up, right? So,
right.
But it's also kind of beautiful.
Yeah. So I've got one here I think would be a pretty short answer. It says, so I'm writing a Friendsim style fan game based around an alternative universe, Alternia, where the Condescend gets killed, and the fan game follows the story of random adolescent trolls dealing with the post-Condescension world. If I want to write a character as a kind of representative of a specific trope or stereotype in internet culture, how do I do that effectively and not make the mistakes the writers of the Dancestors did? I think it's my turn to go first. So, I would say that like anytime you want to write like an embodiment of a like trope, ask yourself like, why do I want to do this? Like, what is the purpose I'm doing narratively and then like meta narratively? So like, am I doing this to be like, is there something specific I want to say within the world? And then is there something like, do I think this will be funny or whatever? And like, think about what that has in terms of implications within your narrative, and also like what the implications are outside of the narrative and going forward. Because like, if you write like a very specific kind of meta narrative reference to like a social media vibe, that's going to date itself like instantaneously. Like, that's one of the things with the Dancestors. It's like, not only are these like, you know, stereotypes of like a social media site archetype, they're really outdated, and they've been outdated for a while. So it's like, I'm not gonna say maybe don't do that, but like, think about why you want to do it, and like approach it from the point of storytelling rather than a point of view of like, I want to do this like callback to real life. Like, your story should take primacy in terms of like making things work and making things happen. Like, it's cool to do meta narrative stuff and it's fun to tell jokes and all that, but like, if it doesn't hold up as a story, then you're gonna have something that very quickly dates itself and very quickly kind of like expires. Is my opinion on it. Anna, I guess you're next.
So rule one: don't be too mean. So like, say you're the internet culture stereotype you're commenting on is like, you know, like an influencer, like a TikTok influencer. Like, don't condemn all TikTok influencers, but you can, like, you know, poke a little bit of fun at them. Also, I mean, riffing off Jonaya's, don't make that their entire personality, because that's, like, thinking about the Dancestors, like, Mulin is very cute. She's nothing but Tumblr gifs. Wouldn't it be great if Mulin could be more than Tumblr gifs? And dating yourself, it can be harmful, it can be charming if done right. Because, like, there are moments in Homestuck where it's like, oh, haha, this is so 2009. Remember 2009? Like, people like nostalgia. So if you approach it from the perspective of nostalgia for this particular moment in internet history, like, imagine 2022 being thought about 10 years in the future.
That's a fucking nightmare.
But 10 years in the future will happen, and people will probably look fondly upon some weird trend happening right now. So if you want to focus on social media or focus on some internet trend, think about it. Like, remember Long Cat Jane? Something along those lines. Make it fond. Don't be, like, poke fun in a fond way. And yeah, don't make it their entire personality.
Oh god, it is
Momo time.
Well, thinking about this, like, what is the difference, or the perceived difference between the beta trolls and the alpha trolls? And with the Alternians, they're sort of a send up of just online culture at the time, where everyone is super ironic and defensive and bitter and petty, and it's kind of working into those characters on this alien planet to try and get to their humanity of, oh, what if we were a little bit nicer to each other, maybe? What if we actually admit that we had feelings? Wouldn't that be kind of interesting? But the alpha trolls don't feel that way, and I think it's maybe not that they were conceived differently at the start. It's just that there was time and people loved the beta troll so much that they were kind of, you know, forced to maybe become more charismatic. But with the Beforans, it's just like Hussey's just being such a fucking boomer that it's exhausting, and you're like, I hate this. You're being nasty. You're being a nasty man. So it's just it's not fun, because it's just a send up of what is making him anxious about the young people, online, and I think that's just like it's so uncomfortable because you're like you're being such an asshole.
Yeah.
That kind of sucks. So don't have a chip on your shoulder, where you sound like a fucking boomer.
Yeah,
Don't do
like
that.
I feel like in general, if you want to do writing with other people at all or for other people, like it really helps to kind of like set aside some degree of your like ego in the sense of like being willing to like hear what other people have to say and work with other people and change and adapt and be fluid, or else you end up in a situation where like the world kind of moves on and you're just like sitting there in the same place you were, and that kind of sucks. It's going to make your writing stagnant, and it's going to make you less likable as a person in general, and it's going to make working with you less pleasant. So yeah, I think that's really good general advice. um Here's one that I think is like something that comes up a lot, and I think it would be cool to answer. So it says, what do you think is personally more important? Oh wait, I'm sorry, this is, I think I must have read that wrong, but actually, yeah, this could be interesting. It says, what do you think is personally more important to liking a character? Being an interesting or important character, or being a good person? I guess would be a good friend IRL. Like how a lot of people dislike characters who are murderers or generally jerks. And or how do you deal less personally with the dichotomy of those when you're writing a character? I think Momo, you're first this time.
Get old.
Yeah.
just get old, because I think, you know, when you're younger, you approach fiction in a profoundly different way because you don't have a lot of life experiences, and you're looking for more things, different things from a story when you're younger. And a lot of younger readers, you know, including myself, can be, you know, more desperate or defensive or and it's not necessarily that you're even wrong. It's just that, you know, the way you experience that makes it a little bit harder to communicate things in writing because it's so vulnerable. That's such a vulnerable place to be in. But you know, when you're old, you don't care, and not caring is sometimes an advantage because you can step back, you can look at like the larger situation of what's going on. What does this character serve in a meta purpose? Because being an interesting and important character is or being a good person. There's no actual line saying that there's a difference between those two. Any character can be both, but they aren't all both.
Yeah.
Being important, everything's important to the story that's being told if you make it that way. Like a character for whatever reason. I don't care. No one should care. If anyone cares, they're gonna get older, so don't worry.
Yeah. You wanna go next? Or?
I love villains. I fucking love villains. There is a reason why I wrote the Mindfang route for DistantQuest. There is a reason why I wrote the best songs in Time's Apprentice for Mindfang. Like, being evil is interesting. So, like, you could, like, characters that aren't evil can definitely be interesting. And characters who are evil aren't always interesting. Like, honestly, there are lots of, like, TV shows out there where the villain is just, like, a one-sided, haha, I'm gonna do something evil because plot reasons.
A cardboard cutout with a gun taped to
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, it's my home security system.
But then you get awful characters, like Mindfang, who is a slave owner who rapes her slaves. Like, you can't get more morally reprehensible than Mindfang. But she is fascinating to dig into. Like,
Yeah.
you can dig into her from the badass pirate angle, but then you can also think about how after she fled the trial, she lost everything. She's a broken woman. She's desperate to cling on to any ounce of power she still has. That's why I have the very specific headcanon that she is not killed out of mercy. She is killed out of self-defense because the summoner realized what she had done. Like, her evilness adds to her complexity, and it makes you pity her, you feel bad for her, but you would never want to touch her with a 10-foot pole in real life. I mean, that's why people are so fascinated with Vriska, because, like, if you knew of Vriska in real life, you would want to drop that friend instantly.
Yeah.
She's not a person to be a friend with. Like, she would not be a good friend. But, like, there is so much to her. She's, like, she's got this whole hero complex going on. She has all of this, like, all this stuff that happened in childhood. She's got all these complex relationships with, like, she cares about people, but, like, she keeps hurting people because it's just what she's always been taught to do. She doesn't know anything else. She tries to better herself. She does better herself. She only betters herself in death. There is so much to go into with Vriska because she's a bad person. So anybody who's like, oh, you shouldn't write that character because they're doing bad things should honestly think twice about all of the fascinating characters out there that are horrible people. And writing a character does not condone what they do. Writing an evil character or a morally dubious character or a character that has done bad things just means you've done your research.
Yeah, so, like, I think this kind of touches on a couple of things we've talked about earlier in terms of, like, generally how you're constructing a story and characters and, like, paying attention to, like, the story as a construct that you want to be, engaging and tells, have a message of some kind and get your effectively communicate what you're trying to communicate with it. And, like, yeah, you're gonna have characters that are, like, horrible people, and they're fascinating, or they're very effective in the story, and, like, that's fine. Like, the character doesn't have to be good in order for them to be interesting, and you can like a character for reasons that are nothing related to, like, oh, I would like this person IRL. It can be like, I like this character. Like, I really like Doc Scratch as a character. I think that he's a very interesting character. I think that his, like, role in this kind of meta-narrative and how that plays into different elements of both Homestuck and then, like, all of the post-canon works is really fascinating. And I've tried to, like, do something interesting with that in Friendsim too, and it's like, Doc Scratch is awful. He's a manipulative, abusive monster. But also it can be a very fascinating character. And, like, I think as a writer, the important thing is to think about, again, like, who is this person? Like, what is their deal? Why do they justify their own actions? Why do they do the things they do? Like, they might have reasons for it. Like, so I've been writing a bunch of Zebra lately. Not a character I did a whole lot with previously, but did a lot of, like, work on portraying him in a way that felt, like, authentic to the original portrayal and also, like, just skin crawling. And he's such a like an insidiously bad person. Like, he's bad in a way that's, like, he wants you to think that he's a good person. And, like, that kind of person is very, like, one, that's a very real thing, and two, that's a very, like, effective. Like, it gets under your skin, and, like, no, I would not like him personally. He is horrible and reminds me of my abusive ex, but, like, is definitely effective in the narrative. So, like, I think setting aside that, like, would I personally like this character question, and, like, that's maybe an interesting thought experiment, but, like, the more important thing is, like, how does this character work within this context of the narrative, and also, like, how do the other characters feel about them? Like, that is relevant. If you've got a character that someone else just absolutely despises in the narrative, that's obviously important. But yeah, it's like, again, as a writer, sometimes you've got to kind of, like, step outside what you would personally feel and, like, think about it not more objectively, because that feels like the wrong way to put it, but more, like, broadly, I guess. Okay, so we've got we do have a couple of questions that are related to game production specifically and writing for games. And I think that those are interesting. We've got one that asks, how flexible is Ren'Py with implementing non-visual novel gameplay, such as the Friendsim 2 Volume 3 retro Metal Gear segments?
That's a you question.
That's a me question. Although I'd be curious to hear from the perspective of people who didn't.
We bring in a wizard.
Yeah, I don't know
providing
Renty.
assortment of amphibians. We leave the room. We ignore the screams. We come back later. It's been programmed.
Yeah.
I give you my words. You make a pretty picture happen on screen.
So so yeah, I'm the developer for Friendsim 2 in addition to the lead writer, and I have a background in software development. So this is not like brand new to me. But Ren'Py in general is surprisingly flexible if you're willing to work with it. It is not originally designed to do things like walk around sections. It is not ideal for that, but it can do them. It has access to the Pygame libraries. It has access to Python. It's something that is available, and if you're willing to like really work at it, you can get it to work. Would I recommend it if that's your primary interest? No. But if you're already writing a visual novel and you decide one day, hey, what if I did an open bound style walk around in it? Then, I mean, at that point, you're kind of committed. So, yeah, or if any of you watching the SAHCon trailer happen to notice maybe one piece of the game looked similar to another game that you might have played, maybe also not a visual novel, that kind of stuff. And so there was a related question that I think that the two of you would probably have more to say on, and like how you think about your writing. It says, in visual novel style games, do you think of the pose changes and such as part of the writing? Do you need the art before you can write the character? So, like, I guess who went first for me? You?
I think I did.
Okay,
so-
Momo, you're first.
Hey, the way that the workflow of a volume goes, you can't write before you have the art. That's kind of not how it works. The script is done, and then it's not the script necessarily is sent to artists. Usually, like maybe a list of poses.
Mm-hmm.
I don't even know if all the artists have access to the script when they're drawing. I know I did, but that's because I wrote the damn thing.
Yeah.
So it's weird. Kind of weird if I didn't. But I do know when I wrote, I did have like specific poses in mind, and I was like trying to visualize like a limited maybe set of expressions that would kind of fit. So I did have ones in mind while I was writing. But that's kind of like the way I wrote the script is imagining the gestalt, or however you're supposed to pronounce that word, in my head. Like I was seeing the final form of it in my head while I was writing.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why I had like such a specific vision for so many assets, and I was such a fucking asshole. And I'd be like, "Oh, I love this. One problem, everything
It's
is
great.
wrong."
We just need it totally different. I mean, it happens, and we reused a lot of the assets in other areas.
That's
It's
right.
fine.
It was okay, but yeah, I just want people to know that happened, and I'm the worst.
No.
Yeah, that's the answer.
I'm curious to your perspective.
I'm not a visual person. I am an audio-based person. So that, honestly, the voices are more important than the art to me. When I wrote my thing, so I had an idea of what I wanted the background to look like, because I guess I was sort of more thinking of them as like a set kind of thing. But the poses, I was not thinking in terms of the poses. Honestly, I didn't write down the poses at all. I just handed the script to Jonaya, and she did the posing for me, and she did a fine job with it. Everything was great. But yeah, I'm an audio focused person. I make audio only musicals for fun. I'm not a visual artist, so I think it really just depends on who. It depends on who you are as a writer if you're thinking about this.
Yeah, so I ended up doing a lot of the sprite setting for the route. So like once the scripts were done and imported, like I was the one who actually went through, read the script, and decided like, okay, this looks like the character should be doing this thing right now. Sometimes with input of varying levels of specificity from the writers, but like sometimes with very general input. When I write, I tend to think of things in sort of a very general way, and I try to have a very I like to have a large selection of different, like, common emotional poses for the characters, and then build out from there. So, like, if you have, oh, this specific thing would be really good to have, let's add that. but to start out with a base of like, different emotions, if possible, like having like different facial features be independent. Like I actually for volume 6, the one with the Jade Blood women in it, which is coming out in a few months, that one we actually had like the artist did like the eyes and the mouth and then the body as like separate layers, so you can kind of mix and match emotional state. Because like sometimes you want very specific, like you're like, oh, this really needs this very specific kind of facial expression.
Doesn't Bronya have 40 different poses?
Oh no, more. It's like 50 something, which a lot of them are variant by just like a facial expression. So like, I think a lot of it does depend on the writer starting and how clearly like they visualize what's happening in the route. Some writers have a much more like general idea of it. Some have a very very specific idea of it. And sometimes like, and I mean, I'm directing the game and I'm doing the sprite setting and like coordinating the art. So like for me, it's more like, okay, I can reach out to people and be like, hey, I want this real specific thing, without having to like bounce it through anyone else, which, that changes things around a little bit. But I think it's important to, again, this comes back to communication with the team. So like, it's important to communicate between the different people involved, and then like some degree of flexibility and willingness to change stuff. Like Momo mentioned that they had asked for like revisions or changes on a couple of things which like fit the look they were going for more. They would provide like a sketch and use that to give the artist an idea of like what we're looking for. And like that's part of game development. Like you don't always hit it right on the first try, and like you have to be willing to sometimes scrap assets or reuse assets or revise assets, because like, if you're just like, nope, this is locked in, then it might be like wildly unsuitable for like, we had one of the backgrounds that like the initial revision just like wasn't at all what was envisioned in the script, and it's like, it was nothing wrong with the background, the artist did a good job, but it just wasn't right for the scene. And it's like, okay, we could either try to force this into place or we could just like do another background. So like to some degree it depends on your like ability to do that and your ability to like redo assets or finish art assets prior to starting a route.
It's kind of like a ping pong match.
Yeah, exactly.
The script is easier to change than an asset. So if you can just change something in the script, it's better to do that. But if it's worth it to make something specific, then
exactly. And sometimes sometimes you'll pick up something in the art that's like really important. So like if any of you have noticed the Bronya sprites, she's got a little grub in her pocket. The pocket grub. And like, so that was not something I requested. It was something that the artist Riot Breaker was just like, this would be cute, I'm gonna put a grub in her pocket. And I actually took that and then added stuff to the script to specifically reference this little grub. We gave the grub a name.
Jonaya named her cat.
Yeah, my cat is named after the grub. Priona Libica is the grub's name. And so like sometimes you'll get something where you see something and you're like, oh, that's a cool detail, I'm going to specifically mention it in the script. Stuff like that. It's like Momo said, it's a ping pong game. You're going back and forth on what exactly you're trying to accomplish and what you're trying to do. And then sometimes it's like you get to a point where it's like, okay, this isn't ideal, but it's good enough to release, and it's like, you know what, that's fine. Like maybe it's not exactly the way you wanted it, but you run out of like time and resources, and being okay with that and being able to make peace with it and then learn from your shortcomings in your next project is important too. So that was way off topic from the original question, but like you learned something, I hope. Okay, so we're getting up near time, but like we don't have anyone coming after us, I don't think. So we can
hour, right?
Yeah, we've got a half-hour buffer before the next thing, so we can go a little over time and we'll answer like maybe a couple more. Let me see. Stuff that is good questions. Lots of good questions, but time is a factor. I thought I saw one that I wanted to answer. do either of you have any like specific questions you see in the list that are like really really jumping out at
I
you?
have a short answer for Kat's first question about metaphors.
Hmm.
And I have another short answer for Isabel's second question about pacing and like cuts and scene cuts.
Yeah, go for
Oh, okay. I can do both. I can be real fast.
it.
So, the kind of rule for metaphors is that like, um, maybe read a full philosophy sometimes. That sounded rude. But like a Jungian theory of like a collective unconscious, everything is sort of everything. Like fiction and metaphor, it's just this weird soup of all the brains that write and read in the same environment.
Hmm.
So it's kind of hard to say that it has nothing to do with that metaphor. Maybe the writer wouldn't tell you, yeah, I meant to put that metaphor in there. But I mean, if we all kind of come from like a historical context on the same planet. Um, so everyone is going to think of something relevant when they see that. Everyone is kind of constantly creating out of their psychology meaning like that. So you just need to expand on it. You just need to make those connections. And if you want to know more about psychological storytelling and you're over 18, go check out Mallow's panel later today at the
Yeah.
convention. It's going to be super fascinating. Um,
Yeah.
and then to if I can do the second one if you want.
Yeah, well you answer those and then we'll chime in on our
Okay,
feelings on
perfect.
the same two questions.
And with scene switching, this is really short. It's going to sound like insultingly easy. You need to cut right when something has changed and like the stakes have changed and there's suspense. You need to cut on suspense. So every time you're cutting from one scene to another, it has to be as soon as a new question is or a new idea is introduced. Because then people are going to go, wait, I want to know more. And they're going to put up with whatever you show them next until you get back to the thing
You
that they care
gotta
about.
keep them
Yeah.
going.
And another shameless plug, if you want an example of a story that does this really well, you can check out Kirk and Goes to a Convention. And
Yeah.
Cole, who has his panel also later
Nice.
today at the con. There we go. I did it.
You did it. I'm gonna answer next. I have a short answer for the first one and a short answer for the second one. So for metaphors for me, I am older than my fellow writers and have lived through a significant amount of shit. And I find that I use that a lot. Like I end up drawing a lot of like personal type metaphors where it's like something that relates to an experience I've been through or something that I've learned about in that experience. So one of the things is with writing is like the more shit you go through, the advantage that has is it gives you stuff that you can use as material. And it like I guess that's the trade-off for having to deal with emotional trauma in your life. You get writing material.
Yay!
That's right. The director of Friendsim 2 told you to seek trauma.
Shittiest
don't
little
don't don't
consolation
don't do
prize.
that.
But if you've already got some
If you've
trauma-
got like yeah stuff you can unpack and like and again Momo's absolutely right, like reading a different like theories of psychology, or even if they're like nonsense or bullshit or long since discredited, they can be interesting. They can give you like something to think about. um and for scene switching, like yeah, cut when something's about to happen. Actually, one of my favorite like I'm so fucking proud of the transition in this is in volume 3 when Mispar is like realizing that like oh my god, something bad is about to happen, and the game keeps cutting like between the action sequences and the visual novel sequences, and the one where it hangs on Marsty saying why wouldn't everyone be alive right before you control the character that goes in and kills everyone. I love that, and it's like you want to try to like keep the player like feed them stuff that makes them want to keep going, lead a little trail of delicious treats leading into the witch's oven.
Yeah, it's kind of like burlesque. Make them want a little bit more.
Yeah, exactly. And Anna, if you want to.
Okay, so for the metaphors, bouncing off Jonaya's point, get mad.
Yeah.
If you are writing a metaphor for something that's like, a real life event or real life thing, get fucking mad. I honestly, my writing isn't very metaphorical to begin with, but don't know. I've written a lot of stuff that's like, reminiscent of capitalism. Just go on your rant about capitalism. Or, like, pour your feelings about said thing into said thing with this thinly veiled, overarching thing, and your feelings on the matter will come through. For the switching thing. So you're saying how it felt fine with Homestuck, but didn't feel fine with Homestuck 2? You know why that is? It was the wait time. When it comes to POV switching, you can't switch for so long that you forget what the other thing is. So, if you've got 6 different plots going on, and you switch to another, but you're switching to another each month, you're not gonna get to that first plot for another 6 months. Honestly, if I think about it, this was one of the reasons why people got so frustrated with Steven Universe, is like, you'd have a plot that happened, and it would be really engaging, and then, if there was a new episode following the same plot the next week, people would be fine, but they would cut it off, and then Cartoon Network wouldn't let them air their next episode for another 3 months, and people would just get frustrated. So if you are doing a bunch of POV switches, like, it worked with Homestuck because it had such a quick upload schedule. Hussey would post something on Monday, and then Monday afternoon he'd post another thing. It'd be a different POV, but it would be fine because on Wednesday the first POV would be back. So it comes down to you can totally have plenty of POV switches. You can totally switch between things, but don't let people forget that thing they were so excited about learning about.
Yeah. And so we're up on time. I'm going to answer one more question, which is like super relevant to kind of all we've been talking about and relevant to like our work as game writers specifically. And I'll start out on this one. So someone asks a big question that's been on my mind for a while. How do you tackle writing plot divergence with the player's choices? So that's something that I've been doing a lot of like reading on and a lot of thinking about since we started working on Friendsim 2. And like the sort of paradoxical answer is you make the player think that they have more control over the narrative than they actually do. So like you have a very limited ability as a narrative designer to, within your time and resources, make an unlimited branching narrative. Like Friendsim 2's got 2 major branches for every route with like those consequences come back with some sub choices, like certain things that you do or don't do can come back later. But like mostly the game has like a couple of branches per route. But then like you're able to create the illusion that you have more depth to that, like different choices that maybe don't lead to hugely different outcomes, but they give like a different flavor to the dialogue that's given, or they present a scene in a different context. So like when you're writing if you're writing an interactive narrative, you kind of have to plot out like, okay, here's what's going to happen in this dialogue tree. And here are the choices I want to matter, and how am I going to take that into account? Because like your choices are basically either you go with the full scope you want of all of the choices matter and everything branches like in these huge trees that go into infinity, which is going to take you forever. And you'll be working on it for a long time. Or if you want to finish it like in a reasonable time, you have to limit choice in a way that, makes your job manageable, but also you don't want the player to feel like their choices just like don't matter. You want to write it so that they feel like they're making a satisfying decision. And then you track that decision and you account for it accordingly. So like, I think the start is to figure out like what scope am I capable of handling? And then how do I make it feel like the player has more control over this situation than they actually do? Like the Telltale Walking Dead games initially did a really good job of that. Like it feels like you're making this big, massive choice and it like basically just changes like one branch in the plot, but it feels like you're making this huge decision. Which is the important thing. Like the player's feelings are what matter here. Like they're your audience. They're the ones you're trying to write for. I will let either of my 2 co-writers now take that one. Because I've rambled.
Honestly, I don't really have much to say about the branching because I'm not great at it. You're very coding minded.
Yeah.
When it comes to me, I have to think of it like physically branching off, and then that gets like really overwhelming after a while. So if you played Friendsim 2, you probably noticed it's a lot simpler than Janaya's routes. Like, sometimes there's diverging dialogue, and there's plenty of choices to make about said dialogue, but I struggled a lot to write that end bit of Volume 2. The end, the little end bit with the argument with either Tizius or Stelsa. Like, that took a lot of work, because I don't think in that way. So, honestly, I guess the advice to get as good as Janaya at writing branching dialogue and diverging paths, learn to code in Ren'Py.
Just become a software developer. It's easy. And Momo, your thoughts to end us out on this.
Yeah, I wish I had an answer that like was something that hasn't kind of been said before about narrative and player choice in games. But it's one of the oldest conversations about RPGs. I will say my personal like masterclass for handling player choice and player expression in a video game world is Dragon Age Origins. My favorite game that is terrible. I love it so much. I wish it was good.
Yeah.
And just the way that cause and effect and real consequence tends to happen, and the way that this world responds accurately. That's probably that's the best you can do. You got to create a new version of the world for every choice. So
Yeah.
what's possible for you in your setup? What systems do you have available to make that happen?
Yeah.
And that kind of defines your limits. For a tabletop RPG, the best shit is gonna come from your players.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if you're writing like a rule book, or like a module, but the best shit is gonna come from your players. So you just need to give them toys to play with.
I've read TTRPG and misread it as like a regular RPG that you're writing on the computer. So yeah, TTRPG, you have a lot more flexibility.
Yeah, if you're writing a module, you don't necessarily you probably should write an ending, but like it's like you write more at the start and you write less and less and less and less at the end. Because those answers are those questions are already being answered as you go along.
So and like in general, I think as one sort of general piece of advice is like if you're really building something up to be significant as like a decision, it would be a good idea to address it in some way, either to like make that choice pay off or to illustrate why it didn't. So like that the players don't feel like you're just telling a linear story. Like I was answering more from the perspective of like something that's a narrative that's being written on like a computer, or something like that. But yeah, even with a TTRPG, like if your players suspect that you're just kind of ignoring them when it comes to like the decisions they make, they're going to disengage, because like at that point you're just kind of like telling them a linear story, and that's not what most people play TTRPGs for.
Yeah, I was dungeon mastering one time, and my players were like, "We're gonna rob the general store." I'm like, "Okay, get through the sheep herd, idiots. Let's go."
Cool. Let's do this.
And that was the best part of the game. So
yeah, wrangling players is interesting.
I've never DM'd. I don't have enough improv skills for that.
Done it like twice, but it was fun. Yeah, so we are super over time, so I think we're gonna call it for today. Thank you all so much for coming out. As always, really good questions, way more than we could answer. I'm so sorry about that. I think if we went through everything, we'd be here for like 3 hours. But yeah, I hope you got something useful out of it. I hope this helps you in your own writing or helps you understand your experiences as a player or a reader. Thank you all so much for coming. Please go check out all the panels. We've got some really interesting stuff happening today. And I hope you enjoy the rest of SAHCon. Either of you want to promote anything or let people know about stuff?
Yeah, if you guys like Hive Swap and like musicals and like punk, specifically girl punk, you should come to Daria's Punk Band the Musical tonight. It's going to be fantastic. We've got 14 brand new parodies and
Yeah.
covers, and yeah, you get to hear the stories of Daria, Tisius, Chixie, and Malik from through song. It's gonna
Hell
be
yeah.
great. Also, Tagora is there for some reason.
Oh god, yes. You're gonna like that, I think.
I hope.
It is an experience. Which I voluntarily participated in. Momo, do you have anything you wanna promote or otherwise
I promoted those panels already. Play Friendsim 2, please. It's so much
Yes.
fun. You'll like it. I promise. I promise you'll like it. And thank you all so much for coming to SAHCon. I know it's been kind of a wild and wacky year.
Yeah.
So, I don't
Yeah.
take it for granted that we're all here today. I really appreciate it. So, thank you, everybody.
Yeah,
You're
thanks.
awesome.
Thanks y'all for, and as far as my stuff, yeah, play Friendsim 2. I feel like that's been a consistent message. Have fun at SAHCon. It's my second year as co-director. It's been really fun. I really like it here. And go follow me on Twitter. I'm at Jonaya Riley on Twitter. I post a lot of random stuff, sometimes about Homestuck, sometimes not.
Oh yeah, subscribe to me on YouTube. I'm archetypically composed.
And Momo, I don't know if you want to ping personal social media or if you'd prefer
Nah,
to.
people can find me if they
Okay.
wanna. All right. Good luck.
If you know, you know.
You know.
It's like an
All right.
ARG. So we're gonna go,
Get outta
and
here. Get
yeah,
outta here.
we don't care where you go, but you can't stay here. We will talk to everyone later. Enjoy the rest of the con. Thank you so much for coming. Bye.
See ya.
How do I end the stage?
And exit quietly.
Exit quietly.
I'm gonna go.
All right, bye, y'all.